The morning sun cast long shadows across the stone walls of Windsor Castle, as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, sat quietly in her private study. Her fingers traced the edges of a letter that had arrived 3 days ago, its official seal now broken, its contents forever etched in her memory. The room was filled with the soft ticking of an antique clock, a wedding gift from the Queen, and the gentle rustle of autumn leaves against the window. William entered the room without his usual confident stride. His shoulders carried a weight that seemed to have settled there overnight, and his eyes held a sadness that Catherine had only seen once before, on the day they learned of his grandmother's passing. He moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back, watching their children play in the garden below with their nanny. "The doctor called again this morning," William said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "He wants to discuss the timeline." Catherine folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer of her mahogany desk. She had read it so many times that she could recite every word, every clinical term that spelled out what their future would look like. The diagnosis had come as a shock, even though she had been feeling unwell for months. What had started as simple fatigue and occasional headaches had gradually revealed itself to be something far more serious. "How long do we have?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. 6 months, perhaps 8 if they were fortunate. The specialist had been kind but clear about the progression of her condition. William turned from the window, his blue eyes bright with unshed tears. "We should tell the children soon. They deserve to know, to have time to—" His voice broke, and Catherine rose from her chair to cross the room to him. She took his hands in hers, feeling how they trembled slightly. These hands that had once nervously fumbled with her engagement ring, that had guided her through countless royal functions, that had held their newborn children with such tender care. "We'll tell them together," she said firmly. "But not today. Let them have a few more days of just being children." Through the window, they could see George attempting to teach Charlotte how to play cricket, while little Louis ran in circles around them, his laughter carrying on the autumn breeze. The sight was both beautiful and heartbreaking, a reminder of all the moments Catherine might miss in their lives. "I keep thinking about all the things I won't see," Catherine admitted, her own voice beginning to waver. George's graduation, Charlotte's wedding, Louis taking his first real steps into the world. All those Christmas mornings, all those bedtime stories I won't be there to read. William pulled her into his arms, and they stood there in the quiet of the study, holding each other as the reality of their situation settled around them like a heavy blanket. Outside, the world continued as it always had, but inside this room everything had changed. "We have to make every moment count," William said into her hair. "Every single day, every conversation, every laugh. We have to fill the time we have with so much love that it will last them forever." Catherine pulled back to look at him, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. "We need to plan, William. Not just for the children, but for everything. I want to write letters for them, for their important days. I want to record videos, create memories they can hold on to. And I want to learn," William said urgently. "I want to learn how you make Charlotte feel better when she's sad, how you get Louis to eat his vegetables, how you know exactly what George needs to hear when he's worried about something. I want to learn all the little things that make you such an extraordinary mother." They spent the rest of the morning in that study, talking about practical matters and dreams alike. Catherine spoke about her hopes for the children's futures, about the charities she cared about and wanted to see continue. William listened to every word, sometimes taking notes, sometimes just holding her hand. As lunchtime approached, they could hear the children's voices getting closer to the house. Their laughter and chatter filled the corridors, a sound that had always been the soundtrack to their happiest moments. Soon those voices would be calling for their mother, expecting her to appear as she always had, ready with hugs and snacks and answers to their endless questions. "We should go to them," Catherine said, smoothing down her dress and checking her reflection in the window. She had become expert at hiding her pain, at maintaining the composed exterior that royal life demanded. "Wait," William said, catching her hand. "Before we go back to being strong for everyone else, I need you to know something. These years with you, raising our children, building our life together, they've been the happiest of my life. Whatever comes next, nothing can take that away from us." Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile she had managed in days. "I love you too. And William, whatever happens, promise me you won't let the sadness win. The children will need you to show them how to find joy even in difficult times." "I promise," he said, sealing it with a gentle kiss. Hand in hand, they walked toward the door, preparing to face their children with smiles and normalcy, at least for a little while longer. Behind them, the letter lay hidden in the desk drawer, its contents a secret they would carry together until they were ready to share the burden with the world. The corridor ahead was filled with the sound of running feet and excited voices, and for a moment Catherine allowed herself to forget about diagnoses and timelines. For now, she was simply a mother going to have lunch with her children, and that was enough. 2 weeks had passed since the morning in the study, and Catherine had thrown herself into what she privately called the project of a lifetime. Every spare moment was spent creating something lasting for her children. Her private secretary had quietly rearranged her schedule, canceling future engagements under the guise of a temporary illness, giving her the time she needed for what truly mattered. In the small sitting room that had once been her favorite retreat, Catherine now surrounded herself with journals, photo albums, and recording equipment. She had decided to document everything she could think of that might help her children navigate life without her. The room had become her sanctuary, filled with half-written letters and recorded messages for birthdays that were years away. "Darling Charlotte," she spoke softly into the small camera William had set up for her. "If you're watching this, it means you're about to graduate from university. I can only imagine how beautiful and intelligent you've become, though I suspect you're rolling your eyes at your sentimental mother right now." She paused, smiling at the thought of her daughter's characteristic independence. Charlotte had always been the most like her, determined and thoughtful, with a quiet strength that reminded Catherine of herself at that age. "I want you to know that whatever you choose to do with your life, whether it's following royal duty or forging your own path entirely, your father and I will be proud of you. Don't let anyone tell you that being a princess means you can't also be exactly who you want to be." The door opened quietly, and William entered with a tea tray, moving carefully to avoid disturbing her recording. He had become her silent partner in this endeavor, anticipating her needs and supporting her through the emotional weight of saying goodbye to moments she would never see. "I'm nearly finished with Charlotte's university message," Catherine said, pausing the recording. "Tomorrow I want to start on George's 18th birthday letter." William set down the tray and sat beside her on the small sofa. "You recorded one for Louis's first day of school yesterday. He's only 4, Catherine. You're planning for when he's 5, and I'm not here to hold his hand at the school gate," she finished gently. "When he's nervous and wants his mummy to tell him everything will be all right." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken thoughts filling the space between them. William picked up one of the journals Catherine had been writing in, its pages filled with her careful handwriting. "What's this one?" he asked. "Recipes and household traditions," Catherine replied. "How to make George's favorite birthday cake. The way Charlotte likes her hair braided for special occasions. The Christmas morning routine that makes Louis so excited he can barely sleep." William flipped through the pages, seeing detailed instructions for things he had never paid attention to before. The specific way Catherine folded the children's clothes, the bedtime routine that worked for each child, the little songs she hummed while cooking dinner. "I never realized how much you do," he admitted. "All these little things that make our house feel like home." "That's why I'm writing it all down," Catherine said. "I don't want the children to lose those small comforts along with everything else. And I want whoever helps care for them to understand what matters to each of them." She turned to a fresh page in another journal, this one labeled, "For William," in her elegant script. "This one is for you. Things you'll need to know about talking to Charlotte when she's upset, or how to help George when he's anxious about something. You're a wonderful father, but you'll be doing it alone, and I want to help however I can." William's throat tightened as he read some of the entries she had already written. Instructions on how to French braid hair, reminders about George's tendency to internalize worry, notes about Charlotte's need for quiet time when she was overwhelmed. "Listen to this," Catherine said, reading from another page. "George's 18th birthday letter. My dearest George, if you're reading this, it means you're about to become a man, and I couldn't be more proud of the person I know you'll become. I hope your father has told you stories about us, about how much we laughed together and how much joy you brought into our lives from the moment you were born." She had to stop reading as her voice began to shake. William reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers as they had done countless times before. "He'll treasure these," William said quietly. They all will. But Catherine, you don't have to carry this burden alone. Let me help you with some of the writing. Tell me what you want them to know and I'll help you find the words. There's so much, she whispered. So many things I want to tell them. So many pieces of advice and love I want to leave behind. Sometimes I lie awake at night thinking of something else I should record, another memory I should document. Then we'll do it together, William said firmly. We'll make sure every important thing is captured. Every piece of your love is preserved for them. That evening, they worked side by side in the sitting room, Catherine dictating while William wrote. Both of them focused on creating a legacy of love that would outlast her physical presence. They recorded silly videos of Catherine teaching them dance moves she had learned as a child, serious conversations about handling public pressure and maintaining personal values, and gentle reminders about being kind to others and to themselves. I want to record something for you too, Catherine said as they were finishing for the night. Something you can listen to when you're missing me, when the loneliness feels too heavy. Catherine, you don't need to. I do, she interrupted softly. You're going to have hard days, William. Days when you don't know how to go on, when the children are asking questions you don't know how to answer. I want you to have something that reminds you that our love story doesn't end here. It just changes shape. As they turned off the lights and prepared to leave their makeshift recording studio, Catherine looked back at the room filled with her words and her love, tangible proof of her determination to remain present in her family's life, even when she could no longer be there in person. Do you think it will be enough? She asked. William wrapped his arms around her, holding her close in the doorway. It will be everything. It will be you, preserved forever for them to find whenever they need their mother's love. The conversation with the children came on a crisp November morning, when the gardens of their country home were painted in shades of gold and amber. Catherine had chosen this place deliberately, away from the formal atmosphere of their London residence, somewhere that felt safe and intimate. The drawing room was warm with morning light, and she had arranged it carefully, removing anything that might feel too serious or frightening. George, now 10 years old and perceptive beyond his years, had sensed something different about his parents over the past few weeks. He sat in his favorite armchair, his legs not quite reaching the floor, watching his mother with the same careful attention he usually reserved for his tutors. Charlotte, 8 and fiercely independent, curled up next to Catherine on the sofa, while 4-year-old Louis played quietly with his toy cars on the rug, occasionally looking up at the adults with curious eyes. We need to talk to you about something important, William began, his voice steady despite the tremor Catherine could see in his hands. Something that's going to change things for our family. Charlotte immediately straightened, her intuitive nature picking up on the gravity of the moment. Are you getting divorced? She asked with typical directness, having overheard playground conversations about other parents. No, sweetheart, Catherine said quickly, reaching for her daughter's hand. Your father and I love each other very much. This is about something else entirely. George leaned forward in his chair. Is it about why you've been going to the doctor so much? And why you sometimes look so tired? Catherine felt her heart break a little at her son's perceptiveness. He had indeed noticed her frequent medical appointments, the way she sometimes needed to sit down unexpectedly, the careful way William had been watching her lately. Yes, it is about that, she said gently. The doctors have found out why I haven't been feeling well lately. I have something called an illness, and it's quite serious. Louis looked up from his cars, not fully understanding but sensing the change in the room's atmosphere. He abandoned his toys and climbed onto Catherine's lap, settling against her chest with the casual trust that only small children possess. What kind of illness? Charlotte asked, her voice smaller now, as if she was beginning to understand that this conversation was going to be more difficult than she had expected. Catherine had rehearsed this moment dozens of times, but facing her children's innocent, trusting faces made every prepared word feel inadequate. It's an illness that the doctors can't fix, darling. It means that my body isn't working the way it should, and over time it's going to get worse. But they can give you medicine, right? George said quickly. Like when I had pneumonia and the medicine made me better? They are giving me medicine, Catherine assured him. Medicine that helps me feel more comfortable and gives us more time together. But this illness is different from pneumonia, George. The medicine can't make it go away completely. William moved closer to the sofa, sitting on the arm next to Catherine. What your mother is trying to tell you is that she's not going to get better. And sometime in the future, probably in a few months, she's going to die. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Louis looked up at his mother with confused eyes, not yet understanding what death meant beyond the abstract concept they had discussed when their pet rabbit had died the previous spring. Charlotte's face crumpled and tears began to fall silently down her cheeks. George went very still, his face pale as he processed what his father had said. "No," Charlotte said firmly, shaking her head. "No, that's not right. You can't die. You're our mummy." Catherine pulled her daughter closer, feeling Louis's small arms tighten around her neck. "I know it seems impossible, sweetheart. I feel the same way. I don't want to leave you, not ever. But sometimes life gives us things we don't want and can't change." "How long?" George asked quietly, his voice very controlled in the way that reminded Catherine so much of William's composure under pressure. "The doctors think maybe 6 months, possibly a little longer," William answered when Catherine found herself unable to speak. "That's not very long," George said, still in that careful, controlled voice. "No, it's not," Catherine agreed. "Which is why we wanted to tell you now, so we can make the most of the time we have together." Louis pulled back to look at his mother's face, his small hands touching her cheeks. "Are you sad, Mummy?" "Yes, I am sad," Catherine said honestly. "I'm very sad because I love you all so much and I don't want to leave you. But I'm also grateful that I get to be here with you right now, and that we know what's happening so we can prepare for it together." Charlotte suddenly stood up from the sofa and ran to William, throwing her arms around his waist and sobbing into his shirt. He held her tightly, his own tears finally beginning to fall. "What about Christmas?" she asked through her tears. "What about my birthday? What about when I need help with my hair or when George has bad dreams?" "I'll be here for Christmas," Catherine promised. "And for your birthday in May if I'm very lucky. As for your hair and George's dreams, well, that's why we need to spend some time teaching Daddy how to do those things. And maybe we can ask Aunt Pippa to help too." George finally got up from his chair and came to sit on the floor next to Catherine's feet. "Will it hurt?" he asked quietly. "The doctors are going to make sure I'm as comfortable as possible," Catherine said. "And you know what? I realize something wonderful. Even when I'm not here anymore, all the love I have for you doesn't disappear. It stays right here." She touched each child's chest gently. "In your hearts. And whenever you need to feel it, you just have to think about me and it will be there." "Can we still talk to you?" Louis asked. "Like when Grandpa Charles talks to Grandmama Diana?" William smiled through his tears at his youngest son's simple wisdom. "Yes, you can always talk to me," Catherine said. "I might not be able to answer out loud, but I'll always be listening." They spent the rest of the morning together on the sofa, the children asking questions, crying, sometimes laughing at memories Catherine shared. She told them about the letters and videos she was making, about how she wanted them to remember her, about how proud she was of each of them. "I need you all to promise me something," Catherine said as the conversation was winding down. "Promise me that you'll take care of each other, and that you'll take care of Daddy. He's going to be very sad for a while, and he'll need you to remind him how to smile." "We promise," George said solemnly, speaking for all three of them. "And promise me that you'll remember to be happy. I know it will be hard, but I want you to keep laughing and playing and being children. That's what will make me happiest of all." As the morning turned to afternoon, the initial shock began to settle into a new reality. The children stayed close to Catherine as if physical proximity could somehow protect them all from what was coming. But there was also a sense of relief in the room, the relief that comes from finally understanding why things had felt different, and from knowing that they would face whatever came next together. The weeks following their conversation with the children took on a dreamlike quality, as if their family was living in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. Catherine had made the difficult decision to step back completely from her public duties, and the official statement released by Kensington Palace spoke only of a temporary illness requiring rest and treatment. The truth remained within their inner circle, a secret that allowed them to focus entirely on each other. December arrived with an unusual warmth, as if nature itself was conspiring to give them one perfect final Christmas season. Catherine had always loved this time of year, and she threw herself into the preparations with an intensity that both inspired and worried William. She seemed determined to create a Christmas so magical and memorable that it would sustain the children through all the Christmases to come. "I want to teach Charlotte how to make proper Christmas pudding," Catherine said one morning as they sat in the kitchen planning their holiday traditions. "And George should learn how to carve the turkey, don't you think? He's old enough now." William watched his wife as she wrote detailed lists, her handwriting still elegant despite the tremor that had begun to affect her hands. She had lost weight over the past month and her clothes hung looser than before, but her eyes still held the same determined spark that had first captured his heart all those years ago. "And the Christmas Eve boxes," she continued. "We need to establish that as our tradition. New pajamas, a Christmas book, and hot chocolate with marshmallows. Promise me you'll keep doing that even when they're teenagers and pretend they're too old for it." "I promise," William said, adding another item to his own growing list of commitments he was making to preserve their family's happiness. Catherine had been specific about wanting their last Christmas together to feel normal, not like a farewell. She insisted on shopping for presents, decorating the tree, and maintaining all their usual traditions. But there were new additions too, carefully planned moments that she hoped would become cherished memories. "I want to record myself reading The Night Before Christmas," she told William, "so they can play it every Christmas Eve even when I'm not here to read to them." The recording session became a family affair, with all three children gathered around Catherine on the sofa in front of the fireplace. Louis sat on her lap, occasionally interrupting to ask questions about Santa's reindeer. Charlotte and George flanked her on either side, old enough to understand the significance of the moment, but still young enough to be swept up in the magic of the story. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse, Catherine read, her voice warm and familiar, the same voice that had soothed their nightmares and celebrated their triumphs since they were babies. William operated the camera, but found himself watching his family more than the technical aspects of recording. He memorized the way Catherine's face lit up when Louis giggled at the funny voices she made for the reindeer, how Charlotte unconsciously leaned into her mother's side, how George mouthed along with words he had memorized from years of Christmas Eve readings. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there, Catherine continued, and William could see her eyes grow bright with unshed tears as she thought about all the Christmas stockings she wouldn't be there to fill. After the recording was finished, Catherine spent time with each child individually, creating special Christmas memories that belonged just to them. She taught Charlotte how to make paper snowflakes, the two of them sitting at the kitchen table with scissors and white paper, creating delicate designs that they hung in the windows of Charlotte's bedroom. "Mummy," Charlotte said quietly as they worked, "will you still be able to see Christmas morning? Like from heaven?" Catherine's hand stilled for a moment before continuing to cut. "I believe I will, darling. I think love is so strong that it lets us watch over the people we care about, even from far away." "Good," Charlotte said decisively, "because I want you to see me open the present I made for you." With George, Catherine spent an afternoon in the stables, teaching him how to properly care for his pony. It was something they had done together for years, but now she made sure he understood every step, every responsibility that came with the privilege of having his own horse. "A true horseman always puts the animal's needs first," she told him as they brushed down Buttercup after their ride. "Even when you're tired, even when it's cold or rainy, the horse depends on you." George nodded seriously, already showing the sense of duty that would serve him well in the role that awaited him. "Mummy, when you're not here anymore, will you still be proud of me when I do things right?" "Oh, George," Catherine said, stopping her brushing to kneel beside him. "I will always be proud of you. Not just when you do things right, but all the time. When you make mistakes and learn from them. When you're kind to others. When you're brave enough to be yourself. Always." Louis required a different approach, his 4-year-old understanding of the world still forming. Catherine spent extra time with him during his bath time and bedtime routines, knowing these intimate moments of care would be among his last clear memories of her. She sang the lullabies she had sung since he was a baby, the same songs that had soothed George and Charlotte before him. "Mummy, sing the star song," Louis would request each night, referring to "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," that Catherine had embellished over the years with verses about brave little boys who shone as bright as the stars in the sky. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, what a brave boy you are," she would sing, watching his eyelids grow heavy, up above the world so high like a diamond in the sky. On Christmas Eve morning, Catherine woke before dawn, determined to see one more sunrise. She made her way quietly to the garden, where frost covered the ground like glittering diamonds. William found her there, wrapped in her warmest coat, sitting on the bench where they had shared so many conversations over the years. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, settling beside her. "I wanted to see the morning," she said simply, "to remember what it feels like to watch the world wake up." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky slowly lightened, watching the frost melt and the garden come alive with the sounds of winter birds. In a few hours, their home would be filled with the chaos and joy of Christmas morning, with children's laughter and torn wrapping paper and the smell of turkey roasting in the oven. "Are you ready for today?" William asked. Catherine smiled, the same radiant smile that had captured his heart 15 years ago. "I'm ready for every moment of it. Every single precious moment." As they walked back toward the house, Catherine slipped her hand into William's, and for a moment, it felt exactly like every other Christmas morning they had shared. The future remained uncertain and heartbreaking, but this day, this perfect Christmas Eve morning, belonged entirely to them. The new year brought with it a noticeable change in Catherine's condition. The fatigue that had been manageable through Christmas now required longer periods of rest, and there were days when getting dressed felt like climbing a mountain. But rather than retreating into sadness, Catherine seemed to find a new sense of purpose in documenting every detail of their family life that she could manage. January became the month of lasts and firsts intertwined. The last time she would help Louis with his morning routine, but the first time she taught him how to pick out his own clothes. The last bedtime story she would read to Charlotte, but the first time Charlotte read one to her. Each moment carried the weight of finality, while simultaneously celebrating new independence and growth. "I want to plan my own funeral,"
Catherine announced one afternoon as she and William sat in their sitting room.
the winter sun streaming through the tall windows. The statement might have shocked him weeks ago, but William had learned that Catherine approached her illness the same way she approached everything else in life, with grace, practicality, and careful consideration for others. "Tell me what you're thinking," William said, setting aside the government papers he had been reviewing. "I want it to be a celebration, not a tragedy," Catherine said firmly. "I want music that makes people smile, flowers that remind everyone of spring and new beginnings, and I want the children to be involved in planning it, so they feel like they have some control over how we say goodbye." Over the following days, their home became an unlikely venue for the most loving funeral planning in history. Catherine involved each child according to their personality and age. George, with his natural sense of ceremony, helped choose the readings and music. Charlotte, ever the artist, designed the programs and selected the flowers. Louis, in his innocent wisdom, suggested they serve cake because Mummy likes parties with cake. "I want there to be white roses," Catherine said as they sat around the kitchen table with notebooks and flower catalogs. "They were in my wedding bouquet, and I want people to remember our happy beginning when they see them." "And I want to sing," Charlotte announced suddenly. "I want to sing that song you taught me, the one about being brave." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of pride rather than sadness. "That would be beautiful, darling, but only if you feel ready when the time comes." "No pressure, all right? I'll be ready," Charlotte said with quiet determination that reminded everyone present why she was so much like her mother. The planning sessions became unexpected, opportunities for the children to ask questions and express feelings they had been holding inside. George wanted to know if his mother would be able to hear the eulogies, leading to a gentle conversation about different beliefs about death and what comes after. Charlotte worried about whether people would remember her mother correctly, prompting Catherine to share stories about the legacy she hoped to leave behind. "I don't want people to remember me as perfect," Catherine told her daughter. "I want them to remember that I tried to be kind, that I loved my family, and that I believed in using whatever influence I had to help others. But I also want them to remember that I made mistakes and learned from them, just like everyone else." As February arrived, Catherine's good days became fewer, but somehow more precious. She had established a routine that maximized her energy for the moments that mattered most. Mornings were for quiet time with William, often spent simply holding hands and watching the sunrise through their bedroom window. Afternoons were dedicated to the children, whether that meant helping with homework, listening to their stories about school, or working on their various projects together. Evenings had become sacred family time. They would gather in the sitting room, usually with Catherine resting on the sofa and the children arranged around her like satellites orbiting their sun. Sometimes they played quiet games, sometimes they watched movies, and sometimes they simply talked about their days, their dreams, and their memories. "Tell us about when you and Daddy fell in love," Louis would often request, never tiring of the story he had heard dozens of times. "Well," Catherine would begin, her voice taking on the storytelling tone that had captivated her children since they were babies. "Once upon a time, there was a young woman who went to university and met a shy prince who was very good at making her laugh. And he was handsome," Charlotte would always add at the same point in the story. "Very handsome," Catherine would agree with a smile at William. "But more importantly, he was kind and honest, and he made me feel like I could be myself, even when the whole world was watching." These evening conversations had become the foundation for the children's understanding of their parents' relationship. Catherine was careful to paint a picture of love that was real and imperfect and beautiful, wanting them to understand that true love wasn't about fairy tale perfection, but about choosing each other every day, especially on the difficult days. One particular evening in late February, as they sat together watching the fire crackle in the fireplace, George asked a question that had clearly been weighing on his mind. "Mommy, are you scared?" The room went very quiet. Charlotte looked up from the drawing she had been working on, and Louis stopped playing with his toy cars. William reached for Catherine's hand, offering silent support for whatever answer she chose to give. "Sometimes," Catherine said honestly, "I'm scared about missing important moments in your lives. I'm scared about Daddy being sad. I'm scared about you forgetting how much I love you." "We could never forget that," Charlotte said immediately. "I know you won't," Catherine replied. "But fear isn't always logical, sweetheart. The important thing is that I don't let the fear stop me from enjoying the time we have right now." "Are you scared about dying?" George pressed, his need for complete honesty one of his most endearing and challenging qualities. Catherine considered the question carefully. "I'm not scared of being dead," she said finally. "I think that will be peaceful. I'm sad about leaving you, but I'm not afraid of what comes next." "Does that make sense?" George nodded slowly. "I think so. Like being sad about the end of a really good book, but not being scared to close it because you know it was a wonderful story." "That's exactly right," Catherine said, amazed as always by her son's wisdom. "Our story together has been wonderful, and even though this chapter is ending, the love in it continues forever." As the children gradually fell asleep around her that evening, Catherine found herself studying each of their faces in the firelight. These precious beings who had made her a mother, who had taught her depths of love she never knew existed, who would carry pieces of her heart with them long after she was gone. "What are you thinking about?" William asked softly, careful not to wake the children. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," Catherine whispered back. "To have had this life, this love, these children. Not everyone gets to love this deeply. And to be loved this deeply in return," William added, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Outside, winter was beginning to loosen its grip on the world, and Catherine could almost sense spring waiting to emerge. She wouldn't see another summer, but she would see the daffodils bloom one more time, and somehow that felt like enough. March arrived with the gentle promise of spring, and with it came the bittersweet realization that Catherine's time was drawing to a close. The daffodils she had hoped to see were beginning to push through the soil in the palace gardens, their green shoots a testament to the eternal cycle of life and renewal. Catherine spent as much time as possible by the windows, watching for signs of the coming spring with an intensity that spoke of someone trying to memorize beauty, before saying goodbye to it forever. Her physical decline had become more pronounced, requiring the discreet presence of medical staff and the kind of careful management that the royal household excelled at providing. But Catherine had insisted that her final weeks feel as normal as possible, refusing to let illness define these precious last days with her family. "I want to write one final letter," she told William one morning as he helped her settle into her favorite chair by the garden window. "Not for the children this time, but for you, for after." William's throat tightened, but he simply nodded and brought her the special stationery she preferred, the cream-colored paper with her personal monogram that she had used for important correspondence throughout their marriage. "What will you say?" he asked gently. "Everything I need you to remember," Catherine replied, her hand already reaching for her pen despite the tremor that made writing increasingly difficult. About who you are when you're at your best, about the father and leader I know you'll become. About how to find joy again when the sadness feels too heavy. While Catherine worked on her letter, the children had unconsciously begun their own process of saying goodbye, though they might not have recognized it as such. George had started asking to hear stories about his mother's childhood, as if collecting pieces of her history to carry with him. Charlotte spent extra time cuddled against Catherine's side, sometimes falling asleep there during afternoon rest times. Louis had become almost clingy, following his mother from room to room whenever she was well enough to move around. "Mummy," Louis said one afternoon as Catherine was resting on the sofa, "when you go to heaven, will you be able to see our house?" "I think so, sweetheart," Catherine replied, stroking his soft hair. "And you know what I'll see? I'll see Daddy making breakfast in the morning and George being kind to his friends at school, and Charlotte painting beautiful pictures. I'll see you playing in the garden and learning new things every day. Will you be proud of us?" Louis asked with the directness that only small children possess. "Oh, my darling boy," Catherine said, lifting him onto her lap despite the effort it required. "I will be so proud of you every single day. When you're good and when you make mistakes, when you're happy and when you're sad. I'll be proud of you for being exactly who you are." The conversations with each child had taken on a precious quality, as if Catherine was distilling a lifetime of motherly wisdom into these final exchanges. With George, she talked about leadership and duty, but also about the importance of staying true to himself, despite the expectations that would be placed upon him. "Being royal means serving others," she told him, during one of their quiet moments together. "But it doesn't mean losing yourself in the process. Promise me you'll remember that being a good man is more important than being a perfect prince." With Charlotte, she spoke about strength and independence, about the particular challenges and opportunities that would come with being a royal daughter in a changing world. "You don't have to choose between duty and dreams," Catherine assured her. "You can honor your family's traditions while also creating your own path. The world needs strong, educated women who care about making a difference." The evenings had become the most treasured time of all, when the whole family would gather in Catherine's bedroom, the medical equipment discreetly hidden behind screens, the room lit by warm lamps that made everything feel cozy and safe. They would read together, tell stories, and sometimes simply lie quietly, listening to each other breathe. "I want to tell you about the first time I held each of you," Catherine said one evening, her voice soft but clear. "George, you were so tiny and perfect, and you looked at me with such serious eyes, as if you were already thinking deep thoughts. Charlotte, you came into the world with your fists up, ready to take on anything. And Louis, you were so peaceful and content, like you already knew you were exactly where you belonged." "Tell us about our first words," Charlotte requested, snuggling closer to her mother's side. "George's first word was Dada, which made your father so proud he called everyone we knew." Catherine smiled at the memory. "Charlotte, yours was no, which surprised absolutely no one who knew you. And Louis, you said cookie, which tells us everything we need to know about your priorities in life." The laughter that followed was gentle and warm, the kind of family moment that Catherine had been treasuring throughout these difficult months. These were the sounds she wanted to remember, the feeling of her children's happiness surrounding her like a warm embrace. As the evening wound down and William began the process of getting the children settled for the night, Catherine called each of them back to her bedside for individual goodnight kisses and final words. "George," she said, holding his face gently in her hands, "you are going to be such a wonderful man. Trust yourself, be kind, and remember that your best is always enough. Charlotte, my brave girl," she continued as her daughter approached, "never let anyone dim your light. The world needs your creativity and your spirit. And Louis, my sweet boy," she finished, pulling her youngest close, "keep laughing, keep asking questions, and remember that being loved this much means you have so much love to give to others." After the children were tucked into their beds, Catherine and William sat together in the quiet of their bedroom, her head resting on his shoulder as they watched the moon rise through the window. "Are you ready?" William asked quietly, the question carrying the weight of everything they couldn't quite say aloud. "I'm ready," Catherine whispered. "I'm ready because I know they'll be all right. They have you, they have each other, and they have all the love we've given them. That's enough to build a beautiful life on." And the letters? The recordings? Everything you wanted to leave for them? Everything is finished, Catherine confirmed. Hidden away for the right moments when they need to hear from their mother again. As they settled into sleep that night, neither of them knowing how many more nights they would have together, Catherine felt a deep sense of completion. She had said everything that needed to be said, created everything that needed to be created, and loved with every ounce of strength she possessed. Whatever came next, she was ready to meet it with the same grace that had carried her through life. The morning of April 15th dawned with unusual clarity, as if the world had been washed clean by the gentle rain that had fallen through the night. Catherine woke to find William already awake beside her, his hand gently holding hers as he watched the sunrise paint their bedroom walls in shades of gold and pink. "Good morning, my love," he whispered, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Good morning," she replied, her voice barely audible but filled with warmth. "It's a beautiful day." They both knew, without needing to say it aloud, that this would likely be their last morning together. Catherine's condition had deteriorated significantly over the past week, and the medical team had gently prepared the family for what was to come. But rather than sadness, there was a sense of peaceful readiness in the room, as if Catherine had completed everything she needed to do and was now prepared to let go. The children came in quietly, as had become their routine over the past few days. George carried a cup of tea for his mother, though she could only manage a few sips. Charlotte brought fresh daffodils from the garden, their bright yellow faces like captured sunshine. Louise climbed carefully onto the bed, settling against Catherine's side with the natural ease of a child who had never known a world without her love. "Tell us the story about the princess who loved her family more than anything," Louis requested, referring to a tale Catherine had invented years ago about a princess whose love was so strong it could be felt even when she traveled to faraway kingdoms. "Once upon a time," Catherine began, her voice soft but steady, "there was a princess who lived in a beautiful castle with the most wonderful family in all the world. She had a brave prince who made her laugh every day, and 3 magical children who filled her life with joy and adventure. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they had heard this story countless times. Today it felt different, more important, as if the words themselves were a gift being carefully placed in their hearts for safekeeping. The princess loved her family so much that when it came time for her to travel to a distant kingdom, she left pieces of her love everywhere she had been, in the children's favorite books, in the prince's morning tea, in the flowers in the garden, and in every corner of the castle where they had shared happy moments together." "And did the family feel sad when she left?" Charlotte asked, though she knew the answer. "They felt very sad," Catherine continued, "because they loved her so much, but they also felt grateful, because they realized that all the love she had left behind was still there with them. Every time they needed to feel her love, they just had to look around and remember, and there it would be, as strong as ever." William watched his wife tell their children this story one last time, marveling at her strength and grace even in these final hours. She had never wavered in her determination to make this experience as gentle as possible for their children, to help them understand that love doesn't end with death but simply changes form. As the morning progressed, other family members arrived quietly. Catherine's parents came to say their goodbyes, tears flowing freely as they told their daughter how proud they were of the woman she had become. Pippa sat with her sister for a long while, sharing memories and promises to watch over the children. Even the Queen, despite her own advanced age, made the journey to spend a few precious moments with the granddaughter-in-law who had brought such happiness to her family. "You have been a gift to us all," the Queen told Catherine, holding her hand with gentle firmness. "Your grace and dignity have been an example to the nation and the world." "Thank you for welcoming me so completely," Catherine replied, "for making me feel like I truly belonged in this family." By afternoon, it was clear that Catherine's strength was fading rapidly. The family gathered in her bedroom, the children curled up on the bed beside her while William sat in the chair closest to her side. The room was filled with flowers, their sweet scent mixing with the warm spring air that drifted through the open window. "I want you all to remember something very important," Catherine said, her voice requiring great effort but her words crystal clear. "Death is not the opposite of love. Death cannot touch love. All the love we have shared, all the happiness we have created together, All of that continues forever. Will you visit us in our dreams? Louis asked innocently. I hope so, sweetheart, Catherine smiled. And even if you can't see me there, I'll be watching over you always. When you see daffodils blooming, when you hear your favorite song, when you do something kind for someone else, I'll be right there with you. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Catherine turned to each member of her family one final time. George, my darling boy, be the leader I know you can be. Be brave, be kind, and never forget that your worth isn't determined by your title, but by the goodness in your heart. Charlotte, my fierce girl, paint the world with your colors. Stand up for what you believe in. Follow your dreams and remember that being strong doesn't mean you can't be gentle too. Louis, my sweet baby, keep your beautiful curiosity about the world. Ask questions. Find joy in small things and remember that being loved this much means you have so much love to give to others. Finally, she turned to William, the man who had been her partner in everything, her fellow adventurer in the greatest journey of their lives. My dearest William, thank you for 15 years of the most beautiful love story I could have imagined. Take care of our children, but don't forget to take care of yourself too. Find happiness again, find laughter again. That's not betraying my memory, that's honoring it. As the room grew quieter and Catherine's breathing became more labored, the family drew closer together. William held her hand while the children each touched her gently, creating a circle of love around her. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I can see the daffodils from here, Catherine whispered, looking toward the window where the garden lay bathed in moonlight. They're so beautiful. Everything is so beautiful. Her eyes closed peacefully and her breathing gradually slowed until it stopped altogether, as gently as a sigh. In that moment, the room seemed to fill with a profound stillness, not empty but full, as if all the love that had been shared in that space over the years had gathered to witness this final, sacred moment. The children stayed close, not fully understanding the finality of what had happened but sensing the deep peace that had settled over their mother's face. William continued to hold her hand, whispering words of love and gratitude for the extraordinary life they had built together. Later, when the children had been gently led away and the necessary arrangements had been set in motion, William returned to sit beside Catherine one last time. The room was quiet except for the gentle sound of wind through the daffodils in the garden below. Thank you, he whispered to her still form. Thank you for teaching me how to love completely, how to be a father, how to find strength I never knew I had. Thank you for showing our children what grace looks like, what courage looks like, what unconditional love looks like. In the days that followed, as the world mourned the loss of a beloved princess, the family she left behind would discover the full extent of her final gift to them. Hidden throughout their home were letters for future birthdays, recordings for difficult days, and small mementos designed to remind them that love transcends physical presence. The funeral Catherine had planned became exactly what she had envisioned, a celebration of a life well lived and a love that would endure forever. Charlotte did sing, her clear voice filling the cathedral with a song about being brave. George read a passage about eternal love with composure that made his father proud. Louis carried flowers, understanding only that this was a way to say goodbye to his mummy. And in the years that followed, whenever the daffodils bloomed each spring, the family would remember that beautiful morning when Catherine had looked out at the garden with such peace in her eyes, and they would know that love, true love, never really says goodbye.